What would you do if your neighbor started invading your privacy, imposing unreasonable rules, and even threatening your property? At some point, we've all felt the frustration of someone trying to manipulate our lives. Imagine moving into a quiet neighborhood, hoping for peace, only to have a neighbor turn into your worst nightmare. This is the story of Alexander Green, who found himself the target of relentless harassment from Olivia Williams, the head of the HOA, when things spiraled out of control. What did he do to protect his rights? Follow this intense and unexpected story to find out. Leave a comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more gripping stories. Alexander Green was not a man who sought trouble. Having spent years in the legal field dealing with criminals, fraudsters, and corrupt officials, all he wanted now was a place to relax and enjoy some peace. Highland Crest, a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio, seemed like the perfect place for a fresh start. His new home, tucked away on a secluded corner lot, far from the bustling streets, promised the tranquility he desperately needed. With a hot cup of coffee in hand, Alexander gazed out of his new home's window, appreciating the tree-lined streets, the silence, and the absence of city chaos. He believed this was his new beginning, a place where he could finally breathe after years of stress. But just days after settling in, something unexpected happened. One morning, as he was hauling boxes inside, he encountered Olivia Williams, a sharp-looking woman with piercing eyes and an air of authority. She was the head of the Homeowners Association, HOA, and unlike most people in the neighborhood, Olivia had a very particular way of maintaining order. Alexander had barely started to unwind when he realized the peace he longed for might not last long. A question kept repeating in his mind. Could he avoid the trouble Olivia was about to bring, or was he about to enter a battle he never signed up for? On his first day in Highland Crest, all Alexander Green wanted was a peaceful retreat after years of high-pressure work in the legal field. But everything changed the moment he met Olivia Williams. She was unlike anyone he had encountered before. With her sharp features and a gaze that seemed to assess everything in sight, Olivia exuded authority. As she approached him, her smile appeared polite, but something in her demeanor told Alexander this wasn't a casual neighborly greeting. "Welcome to Highland Crest," Olivia said, her voice smooth yet firm. "We're looking forward to having you join the HOA. From community events to maintaining the beauty of our neighborhood, we have certain guidelines and benefits for our residents." Alexander studied her face, sensing the certainty in her tone. But what unsettled him was the feeling of being pushed into something he had no interest in. He had read the HOA's regulations and had no desire to be bound by unnecessary restrictions. "I appreciate the invitation," he replied, keeping his tone calm, "but I'm not part of the HOA." Olivia didn't show any immediate frustration, but Alexander noticed a flicker of something different in her eyes. For a brief moment, her expression hardened. But just as quickly, she masked it with her composed demeanor. "I understand that your property isn't technically under HOA jurisdiction," she said, "but most homeowners here choose to join. I think you'll find it's in your best interest." Despite Olivia's persistence, Alexander stood his ground. But one lingering question echoed in his mind. Had he made the right choice by refusing, or had he just set himself up for an unforeseen battle with the most powerful person in the neighborhood? After refusing to join the Homeowners Association, HOA, Alexander Green thought he had avoided unnecessary trouble. But the peace he had sought was slowly unraveling. Each morning he received letters from the HOA, violation notices about his lawn care. Strangely, his grass was never overgrown, never beyond the limits. Looking out at his yard, everything was neatly trimmed, well maintained. But Olivia Williams, with the sharp eyes of an HOA president, seemed to see things differently. Frustration began to build. He sighed, holding the latest violation notice in his hands, unable to understand why Olivia was doing this. "My lawn isn't too long," he muttered, yet each notice felt like increasing pressure. What was Olivia's motive? Was this her way of punishing him for refusing to join the HOA? Or was there something deeper at play? A part of Alexander regretted moving here. All he had wanted was a peaceful life, but Olivia was making everything tense. With each notice, the injustice of it all became clearer. Were these rules even necessary? The feeling of being watched, monitored, and controlled made him uneasy, but he refused to let her win. With renewed determination, He stepped outside, adjusted his lawn exactly as he wanted, not for Olivia, but for himself. Yet deep down, he knew this wasn't over. One question haunted him. Did Olivia really believe she could control his life forever? And could he fight back without losing the peace he so desperately wanted? Each time Alexander Green received a violation notice from the HOA, he felt his patience wearing thin. Despite his lawn being meticulously maintained, the notices kept coming. The injustice of it all became unbearable. Deep down, he knew Olivia Williams was trying to control him with her absurd regulations. He was exhausted from her constant interference. One morning, after receiving yet another letter, Alexander decided he had had enough. With determination in his steps, he walked straight to Olivia's house. The time for silence was over. Standing at her doorstep, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him, but he didn't waver. He knew this wasn't just about a petty violation. It was about his right to live in peace. When Olivia opened the door, her polite smile was a mask, but her eyes betrayed her tension. "Mr. Green, how can I help you?" she asked, her tone less welcoming than before. Alexander held up the violation notice, his gaze unwavering. "My grass isn't overgrown, and I'm not violating any rules," he said firmly. Olivia didn't immediately respond. She simply stared at him, her expression shifting subtly. Then with a sigh, she muttered, "It's always easier when you don't make things difficult, Mr. Green." A flicker of realization struck him. This was never about the lawn, but instead of backing down, Alexander felt a new sense of hope. He had spoken up. He had taken the first step in reclaiming control over his life. Now the real question was, what would Olivia do next, now that she knew she couldn't intimidate him? Day by day, Olivia Williams intensified her pressure on Alexander Green, escalating the tension between them. Even though he had confronted her and refused to comply with her unreasonable HOA rules, Olivia wasn't backing down. Instead, she found new ways to target him, as if determined to force him into submission. One morning, while working in his home office, the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he was met by a city inspector. "Mr. Green, we received a complaint about unpermitted renovations at your home," the inspector said, his voice professional but firm. Alexander's stomach tightened. He hadn't done any renovations. It didn't take long for him to realize what was happening. Olivia had launched a campaign against him. She wasn't just using HOA rules anymore. She was weaponizing bureaucracy to make his life harder. Regret settled deep within him. The peaceful life he had sought was quickly turning into a nightmare. But the biggest shock came the next day. A sanitation worker knocked on his door, informing him that there had been an anonymous complaint about his trash bins not being properly stored. Alexander's frustration boiled over. He could feel Olivia's influence behind every move, but instead of feeling defeated, his resolve only grew stronger. Each time Olivia struck, he became more determined. He wasn't going to let her push him into a corner. Would Olivia continue escalating her tactics? Or would she eventually realize that not all battles can be won through power and control? That question lingered in his mind. But one thing was certain. Alexander wasn't giving up. Peace came at a price, and he was ready to pay it. On a quiet night, as Alexander Green worked late in his home office, a strange noise from outside caught his attention. His instincts sharpened, a strange unease creeping over him. He stood up, turned off the light, and moved silently toward the window. What he saw made his heart stop. Olivia Williams stood outside gripping a red gasoline canister, pouring fuel around his car. Her movements were deliberate, her posture tense, as if she had nothing left to lose. A rush of shock and disbelief surged through Alexander. Was she really willing to go this far? For a split second, an unexpected feeling of pity surfaced within him. Did she truly believe this act of desperation would solve her problems? Or was this the outburst of someone who couldn't accept defeat? He couldn't afford to hesitate. With steady hands, he grabbed his phone, switched to video mode, and began recording. His pulse pounded, not from fear, but from sheer determination. He couldn't let her win. This was more than just a crime. It was a violation of his safety, his privacy, his right to peace. A deep regret swelled inside him. They could have coexisted. It never had to come to this. But Olivia had pushed too far, and now the line had been crossed. Then Olivia pulled out a lighter. A small flicker of flame appeared in the darkness. Alexander knew there was no time left. He rushed out the door. His sudden presence startled Olivia. Her eyes darted to his phone screen, where her every action had been captured. Panic flashed across her face. Without a word, she turned and ran, dropping the gasoline canister onto the pavement. Alexander stood there, his breath heavy, watching as she disappeared into the shadows. One thought haunted him. Did Olivia realize the severity of what she had done? Or was she still clinging to the illusion that control and power would always be hers? As Olivia Williams fled back to her house, the gasoline canister left behind in her wake, Alexander Green felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This wasn't just another manipulative HOA tactic. This was arson, a direct attack, a crime that could have cost lives. The sight of Olivia's retreating figure didn't bring him satisfaction. It brought a deep, cold realization. She wasn't just trying to control him anymore. She was willing to destroy him. A flicker of sympathy remained. Was Olivia really so desperate, so consumed by her need for power, that she would resort to something this reckless? But sympathy wouldn't stop him now. Enough was enough. With resolute steps, Alexander strode forward, his footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Before Olivia could fully close her door, he was already there, face to face. Her expression shifted, fear replacing arrogance. "Don't make me do this, Olivia," he said, his voice calm yet unwavering. She didn't speak. "If you don't stop, I won't hesitate to use every legal tool at my disposal," he continued, "as a federal prosecutor, to bring you to justice." Her confidence shattered. The smugness she once carried was gone. Her hands trembled. Her breathing quickened. For the first time, she realized she had lost. Alexander could see the moment it hit her. Her empire of control was crumbling. She took a step back, and then another. He didn't need to say anything else. She knew, and for the first time, Alexander felt relief. Not victory, not vengeance. Relief. But one thought still lingered in his mind. Did Olivia truly understand that every action had consequences? Or was she still trapped in her illusion of control? The entire neighborhood woke up to a shocking sight. For years, Olivia Williams had ruled over Highland Crest with an iron grip. But today, her reign was coming to an end. Alexander Green stood on his porch, watching 3 black SUVs pull up to Olivia's house. Federal agents, dressed in dark suits, their expressions unreadable, they stepped out with arrest warrants in hand. A strange feeling washed over Alexander. Not triumph, not revenge, but unexpected finality. This was the moment he had been waiting for. But now that it was here, he didn't feel the satisfaction he expected. Instead, he felt something else. Regret. Olivia Williams stood frozen at her front door. Gone was the confident, arrogant woman who had manipulated and tormented the neighborhood. Now she was pale, motionless, her breath shallow as she stared at the 3 agents approaching her. She had always believed she was untouchable, that her power, her influence, would shield her forever. But today there was no escaping the truth. One of the agents read her the charges, and in that moment, Alexander saw it, the exact second she realized it was over. Her illusion of control had shattered. Her hands trembled. Her face lost all color. She had played the game for too long, and now the consequences had come. Alexander felt no joy watching it unfold, only a profound understanding. Power isn't permanent, and those who try to control others always face the truth in the end. As Olivia was led to the waiting SUV, a final question echoed in Alexander's mind. Would she ever accept what she had done? Or would she remain in denial, clinging to the ruins of her once unshakable authority? Either way, this was the end, and the truth had finally won. After Olivia Williams was arrested, the Highland Crest neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The endless violation notices, the constant battles over HOA regulations, they were now nothing more than distant memories. Standing on his porch, Alexander Green surveyed the peaceful surroundings, feeling a sense of relief he couldn't quite put into words. No more prying eyes, no more tension with every passing day. The air itself felt lighter. Yet a part of him felt an odd sense of regret. Not for Olivia, but for the relationships that had been fractured, for the trust that had been eroded. The neighbors who had once stood by Olivia were now silent. But their unease was visible. Anxiety over the unknown, over the changes they weren't sure how to handle. Some still believed Olivia had been acting for the good of the community, insisting that control was necessary. But most now saw her reign for what it truly was, an oppressive dictatorship disguised as leadership. Alexander couldn't help but wonder, would those who defended Olivia ever acknowledge the reality of what she had done? Or would they continue to live in their illusion of obedience and control? Yet despite these lingering questions, hope flickered within him. Highland Crest had changed, not just physically, but in spirit. For the first time, Alexander felt free, no longer trapped under ridiculous restrictions, no longer at war with an HOA determined to bend him into submission. This neighborhood finally belonged to the people who lived in it, not to an organization that sought to control them. After everything, he had finally found the peace he had been searching for. That morning, as Alexander Green stepped outside, something unexpected caught his attention. A sealed envelope, neatly placed on his porch. Opening it, he raised an eyebrow in surprise. Inside was an HOA membership application. For a moment, he laughed. Not out of arrogance, not out of victory, but out of sheer irony. Once he had fought tooth and nail to resist this organization, and now they wanted him to join. Something was different this time. It wasn't about following oppressive rules. It wasn't about bending to HOA control. It was about a neighborhood that had changed because of him. For the first time, the HOA was no longer a weapon used to control residents, but an organization that needed to redefine itself. A strange feeling of regret washed over him. He had never wanted this fight, but now he understood that every battle comes at a cost. Even so, he felt a newfound connection to this place. He had survived. He had won. And more importantly, Highland Crest was no longer under the shadow of fear. Olivia was gone. There were no more petty retaliation tactics, no more violations fabricated to exert control. For the first time, Highland Crest truly belonged to its people. Alexander clenched the HOA application in his hand, and instead of signing it, he laughed again. This neighborhood didn't need to be ruled. It belonged to those who truly cared for it. So why should he rejoin a system he had fought so hard to break free from? One question lingered in his mind. Could he continue to protect this newfound freedom? Or one day, would another Olivia rise trying to seize power once again? For now, he didn't have the answer. But until that day came, he would savor the victory he had earned. Highland Crest had changed, and he had become an unshakable part of that change. A lesson that can't be ignored. The story of Alexander Green and Olivia Williams serves as a powerful lesson about power, control, and justice. It proves that truth will always prevail, and when someone abuses their authority, the law will step in. When Alexander faced Olivia's relentless oppression, he didn't back down. At first, he only wanted peace. But Olivia forced him into a battle he could no longer ignore. Baseless violation notices, secret smear campaigns, manipulation and intimidation. She had tried everything to break him, but instead of succumbing to hatred, he used his intelligence, his integrity, and his authority as a federal prosecutor to bring her down the right way. In his darkest moments, the injustice of it all weighed on him, but it was in those moments that he realized he would never let anger consume him. He didn't fight back with revenge. He fought back with truth. And when Olivia's empire of control collapsed, she was forced to face the consequences of her own actions. This story doesn't just teach us that power isn't eternal. It reminds us that integrity matters. The twists and turns in Olivia's downfall weren't coincidences. She thought she could manipulate the system forever. But in the end, she was undone by her own schemes. Alexander's strength didn't come from anger. It came from his unwavering belief in justice. He didn't just protect his own freedom. He freed an entire neighborhood from fear. Did Olivia ever regret what she had done? Or did she live in denial, refusing to accept that she had lost everything? Perhaps we'll never know. But one thing is clear. Power, when abused, always crumbles. And when someone crosses the line, the law will always find its way in.